Hey everybody, I'm super excited to be back and this time with an amazing counterparty on this call. So I'm really extra super excited. Now we have to change the title to extra super excited for this event with Yosef Shaftal from the Israeli Blockchain Association. And by the way, just a precursor, I'm in Zurich and I'm wearing a shirt because I got a really important meeting today with some institutions that really want to subscribe to Truflation. So that's why I'm super smart, unusually so. But nothing about me. Yosef, thank you for being here and really happy to have you here.
Hey man, it's an honor to be here with you, man. Looking forward to this.
Yeah, no, you and I met about it's nearly a year ago, and or maybe yeah, and we hit it off right away. And I was always really impressed by your marketing prowess, your business acumen. You've been in crypto. You're super connected around this, and you love economics, right? You love the whole macro and economic scene. So that's sort of how did you get involved with the Israeli blockchain? What was your first steps into the blockchain world, and maybe share a bit on your background and who you are.
Sure, with pleasure. Actually, it's interesting, but I also have one of those moments that I think everybody has when the first time we heard about crypto and Bitcoin, and we thought that it was just something that was like, a fad or whatever. For me, that story is actually in 2009, 2010, when I was a precious metals trader out in the States. And had one of my clients that told me he wanted to, there's this digital gold, it's called Bitcoin. What are your thoughts on that? And I thought, come on, that's garbage. Who cares about it, right? So that was my first touch, basically, back in 2009.
Yeah.
And ever since then, it's been a story of,
Wow.
the evolution, watching this grow has been definitely amazing. And with the Israeli Blockchain Association, it was about 2 years ago when I got started, when I joined the team, and I'm leading it right now. And we're basically a consulting firm that anything that's dealing with blockchain, whether you're a startup that's just looking to explore the ideas, all the way to some blue chip big name companies. Some of them are Fortune 500 as well. They need any help and guidance on their Web3 strategy, crypto strategy, so forth and so forth. We're here to help them out, and that's been sort of like our main focus over the past years.
Yeah, well, I think on that note, one thing, remember it started in 2009. It went from Bitcoin, and we had then cryptocurrencies. We went to the blockchain, and now we're Web3. How do you feel from with your marketing sort of understanding? What's that evolution? How did that come about, and why do you think we've changed the name so often associated with the projects and technology that we're working with?
That's actually a very good question. It's actually what's interesting is that the narratives of me, like sort of like watching it. First, there was Bitcoin, and then there
Yeah,
was everybody that tries to be Bitcoin, and then
yeah,
they failed, and because colored coins failed, Vitalik thought of Ethereum, and then the next cycle started that everybody wanted to do a better Ethereum. You know what I mean? And now we're sort of at the stage where everybody wants to do better decentralized applications than what's available right now. But we definitely do see that evolution happening. And in the beginning, you're right, it was all about coins, right? Nobody was even
yeah.
calling Bitcoin Bitcoin. It was called coin, right? All over the world. It was the coin, coin, coin. And now you see basically it turn into Web3, which is interesting because you see so many founders that are like coming from Web2 world, that had their $100 million exits and so forth, $1 billion exits even, right? That
Yeah,
come to us to
yeah,
chat with us, and they don't call it crypto, they call it Web3. And when you go into more detail and talk like a crypto, they don't understand crypto, but they all believe that Web3 is the future, right? And I find it kind of good angle, you know what I mean? A scalable angle that we didn't have until now. So, thank you,
yeah.
Gavin Wood, for coining the term, right?
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. It's sort of all of a sudden it's sort of legitimized the whole sort of cryptocurrency that was always sort of had a bit of a negative connotation. If you call it Web3, all of a sudden it's like, yeah, it's now sort of somewhat, sort of acceptable, and the enterprise can adopt a Web3 strategy, right?
100%. So it was like, I was actually talking about it a couple of weeks ago. I was like, yeah, man, how do you scale something that has this bad reputation? And, all this,
Yeah,
like, it started off, it was not the best reputation in the world. Only like select few individuals were using it, right? And then
Yeah.
it went through like additional circles and circles and circles. That additional layers of people just came in all over and over again, and finally you got the name Web3 that everybody can feel, understand, relate to, and I guess that's why people are so excited about it. So it's definitely a big check mark for coining out the term.
Yeah,
The
no,
people that did it.
definitely. Yeah. I think one thing that I also find, right? I mean, given where we're at, right, and your exposure in terms of dealing with small startups, with bigger enterprise that are looking at Web3 or blockchain technologies, how do you feel, given, we've just come into, we've been actually in crypto land, we've been in a bear market for about a year now, right? And but in fiat world, it's been compounded with the whole sort of financial and economic and supply chain issues that are taking place. How do you find the market at the moment, and have you seen some sort of changes in the companies you're interacting with? You already mentioned the Web3 companies from Web2 entrepreneurs moving into this area, but have you already also seen sort of other changes or trends that you're seeing happening right now?
Absolutely. One thing that's for sure is that, like you said, that we've been in a bear market for about a year. I'd say that it's actually longer than that because the
Okay.
Q3 of last year, Q4 of last year, I called it as a fake out, basically, fake out, fade
Yeah.
out type of thing. And it's been happening because there was the reason why the Q3, Q4 bull market happened last year was basically because of the GameFi hype that was created, right? And
Yeah.
since then,
Yeah.
we saw a major collapse in GameFi in general, to the point where people have raised billions of dollars in funds, but they just don't deploy it because it's hard to deploy because it's such a unproven concept, right? And this is the reality right now that that's what's happening. Now, on another note, a year ago, you were dealing with a lot of mediocre teams, and when you had a super team, it was like, wow, wow, what a super team. And back then,
Hmm.
like mediocre teams were getting funding very, very easily. You just had to be doing something and go into the primary market to raise money, and you'd be oversubscribed within 24 hours if you were somebody, right? And right now, we see that you have superior teams that are joining the Web3 space, and the funding is not as amply available to them as it was to mediocre teams a year ago, which puts you in a sort of like a survival of the fittest because right now is the time when the next generation of cryptopreneurs are going to be raising money. And just like it was back in 2017 and 18, some of the success stories of today were the same guys that were struggling to raise money back in 18. Back in, they were really struggling to raise money. But guess what? Today they're near protocol. Today they are Uniswap. Today they are
Mm.
1inch. Today they are
Yeah.
Chainlink. Today they are who they are, right? And this what gives me the hope because it takes exceptional entrepreneurs. They're going to bring the adoption because that's the only way you can bring adoption in the space is by having exceptional entrepreneurs building exceptional products that actually solve needs out there. That's what's going to bring the adoption that we need. And we see a lot of these types of individuals basically raising money right now or trying to get into this space right now and find the solution to the problems that actually exist. And that's why I'm so bullish right now. And so we're so happy to work with anybody. We haven't stopped. We haven't taken a break. On the contrary, we work harder than ever before because that's where we're going to identify the next decacorns and unicorns.
And do you think it's from an entrepreneur standpoint and all the entrepreneurs that you meet, do you think it's more about the bravery, the courage to enter into a market when it's a bear market, or do you think it's more it's the grit that you need, the hustle that you need comes to shine stronger when the going gets hard, the hard get going or the tough get going type thing?
That's
What do you think
actually
is yeah.
that's a very very good question. Actually, I'm glad you brought that up
Yeah.
because what's unique is that everybody that I personally know that got into the crypto, got into the Web3 or whatever, right? They all
Yeah.
were surprised by what was happening from the outside world. and they thought that because of their superior skill set or superior execution skills or their superior marketing abilities or whatever, they would be able to basically checkmate any available primitive or any available company that exists, project or protocol that exists in Web3 right now, right? So they'll be able to easily checkmate them, only to come to realize that the way things work in crypto are completely different from the way things work in traditional business or in Web 2 or whatever you want to call it, right? From the legacy, like you said earlier, right?
Yeah.
And then they all have this period when they have a learning curve, and they're like, wait a second, do I really, now that I understand the business, do I really want to stick around with it? Because the easy money that I thought that I would make because I'm a genius or God's gift to humanity, I don't see that it's feasible. So do you want to stick it out, or do I want to find a different vertical for me to basically use my time and resources? And that's when you have this churn of entrepreneurs that happen. And the exceptional ones that are here for the right reasons and they already understand the dynamic and how it works, they actually stick around. And they're the ones that create, the big things that become mainstream afterwards in the States. But that's one thing that definitely, like, entrepreneurs that want to come, put your ego aside. We understand, we appreciate and respect that you had a lot of accomplishments, but now you need to understand that you're in the Web3 space. It is governed by its own set of rules and by its own set of dynamics that you need to understand before you can actually come arrogantly and say, I'm going to, take over it and conquer it.
Yeah, no, I definitely. I mean, you feel that, and you feel that the industry sort of is going through. On the one hand, we are going through a new set of talent coming in, and I feel that we've gone from really this crypto only sort of let's token create money out of thin air type
Mm-hmm.
concept to all of a sudden it's like, how do we build something of utility? And then how do we build sustainable long-term value associated with that, which takes time, right? You don't do that in 1 or 2 days, or in a quick ICO and then bolt. However, I do feel that in this industry, we've actually had the ability to create a story, build the hype, list the token, and then use the funds that we gain from listing and raising to then actually go and build and pursue that promise. And I think you are in an extremely fortunate yet difficult position to always be able to identify who those individuals are that are actually going to be able to follow up and pursue, and execute and commit to this. How do you,
Absolutely.
as an asset
We're,
allocator, how do you,
it's the
how do
hardest
you,
thing out there. It's the
sorry,
hardest thing. It's the hardest thing in the world to find and to pick the winners. And
yeah,
for us, it's people's first business. You know what I mean? What we care about are the people that we actually are doing business with, and what we care about how resilient those people are and how driven they are, and what's the reason why they're doing what they're doing. What's the fundamental reason why are they coming into this space? You know what I mean? And why they're building in this space. Is that because they want to get rich quick? Or is that because they really believe that they want to change the world? You know what I mean? They believe that they actually can do something
yeah,
that can, bring a greater good. I'll give you as an example, without going far, right? And what you've been building with Truflation.
yeah,
I personally have been thinking for a while, like, why the heck do we have to wait once a month? And it's like the same in every single country in the world, basically. You have to wait once a month for some
yeah,
dude to come
yeah,
out and say, hey guys, here's the rate. Good luck. Have a good day. God bless you. You know what I mean? And then afterwards, you have to wait for another 2 weeks for you to understand how another guy that's basically running the show, the central bank or whatever, right? As to what his opinion is on the number that were said a couple of weeks ago. You know what I mean? And it's basically like we're in a stage right now where we're one click away from anything. And I was like, why is there not a way for us to track the real-time economic data in the world, for us to see it in real time and get the data that we need? You know what I mean? Because we're no longer in a stage as a humanity, right? We're no longer at a stage where when we want something, we don't get it right away. Otherwise, we get depressed. You know what I mean? I mean, that's just the reality about humanity right now. We just need the data right now, and that's it. And we don't care what the data is going to cost us. We don't really care about. We just want to make sure that the data is quality and it's available on demand. and you're creating this, and your background is also stellar with what you have done in the world, right? In your life and so forth and so forth, right? That was a no-brainer for me. A great guy, great team, solve the challenge that I believe is needed in the future of the space. What else is there to think
Yeah.
about, right? And we're looking for people like you with a flashlight in every single corner of the world. So not only in Israel but everywhere.
Everywhere. I think that's been an interesting, um, evolution with particularly with blockchain, and it's been a very global phenomenon, and the traditional hubs where innovation took place had expanded very quickly beyond those hubs, right? Very quickly, you saw pockets of innovation happening outside in new cities, in new areas, right? And yeah, how have you found that? I mean, yeah, that's like, how have you stretched your network and relationship into a global environment from Israel itself, right? How's that journey been?
That's a great question as well. I mean, we're lucky because we're the association. We're basically
Yeah,
like partnered up with a whole bunch of associations all over the world,
yeah,
which made
yeah,
our life very easy for us to do due diligence on people and who the
yeah,
people really are. And that just was been extremely helpful for us. But on the
yeah,
other hand, it's also, you have to know what you're just looking for, and they have to be like a. I'm personally, I don't understand much about a lot of things, but one thing that I do care, that I've cared about a lot, is sociology and studying just the people for who they are, the
yeah,
humanity for who they are. And I call myself a people's person, and I think that I'm a people's
yeah,
person. And I'm lucky to say that I have studied a lot of people in my life, and
yeah,
that's what makes my life and our life a lot easier. Combined with the fact that we have people with the boots on the ground that help us do due diligence on them, and then, as it said, good reputation is worth its weight in gold, and it really is,
yeah,
or it's worth its weight
yeah,
in ledgers, or whatever you want to say, right? It's worth its weight in bits. But
yeah,
and we're proud of that because you do the work. The work that you do is good. People talk about you, and then people just spread the word and bring their friends and have exposure.
yeah. And working, having worked with you now over the last year, and we work pretty closely together, and that's what I love about it. I know how you manage to balance. You work your ass off, excuse my language, but you're always available every time we have a chat. You're no matter what day, except certain times they are sort of very holy to you, and they don't move. You won't budge. This is my family time, and I'm sorry, I'm about to go and spend time with family, and I'm out, right? And or I'm on vacation, and this is the time you can get me maybe once or something if it's really drastic. But I love that element where you just really, you're so committed to the things that you have in life, which is, yeah, you don't see that much, and it's good to
Thank you so
see.
much. Thank you
Yeah,
very much
yeah,
for that. It's the passion, man. When you're
yeah,
passionate about what you're doing and you really believe, and most importantly, when you see the impact that you have on people, right? When you work with
yeah,
them, it's just so satisfying. It's so, it's just how to put it. You feel self-actualization on a different level completely. And me
yeah,
personally, like, everybody has their own little mission in their life. I personally feel like God Almighty created me for me to help people, then need people with people skills, and that's why
yeah,
I'm here. So that's why a lot of these technically oriented founders. You're not one of them, by the way, because you're also quite charismatic yourself. It's not the point, but a lot of these people that are like super technical, sort of like our
yeah,
computers themselves, right? Like AI computers themselves. That's who they
yeah,
are, and they don't really have this people skill that's attached to it. And us being able to bring that human aspect into code is what what we have found to be the most successful and most beneficial for startup founders in the space in general. And by the way, in big companies as well, you'll be surprised how many people in big companies, they are running their departments, Web3 they call it, metaverse they call it, yada 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 yada, but they just they understand code. They understand the dogma. They don't understand the human aspect to it. And I think that we're still like years away till code is going to be the law, right? We're still ways ahead till that's going to happen. Until then, it's humans are the ones that are controlling the code and helping make a better code. So that's what we're here to help out with.
And how do you feel? That to me, that's really important. And I feel that's one thing that adding that flavor of human element into blockchain and crypto will help propel us into the next sort of sphere of users, or accelerate sort of the adoption of users. Um, when we talk about Web 5, it's Web 3 meets Web 2, and then it comes out Web 5, hocus pocus, and but how do we bring that humanity element into there, or where do you see that coming from, and how and does that manifest itself? I mean, it's a difficult
I don't know.
question, right? But
It's a good question too. I say this all the time that I personally, you asked me earlier what I think about Web3. I think that Web3 is a very marketable and very ambitious pipe dream that we're
yeah,
like, years away from it. I want to
yeah,
invest and I want to help people that do Web 2.5. You know what I mean? That's
yeah,
going to get us there. And it's going to
yeah,
bring the theory down for the actions that are going to support the actions moving forward. So I personally think that, like, yeah, I think that the fact that the kids right now are more excited about crypto coins than they are about stocks, that's a good
yeah,
indicator. Because I remember when I was
definitely.
14 years old, I was researching the stock market because back then you had Google Finance and you can check out the PE ratios and so forth and
Yeah,
so forth. It
yeah,
was cool and exciting. But right now, kids
yeah,
don't care about stocks unless it's GameStop or something, right? But they just care about NFTs. They care about crypto coins because they have this sort of like this cause and effect that it's cool, it's profitable, and it's the future. And those are the kids that basically are going to grow to first go into the middle management of the companies, and then afterwards, hopefully, go into the higher management of the companies. And this is already going to be normal for them, the particular processes that crypto brings. And that's where we're really going to see the full adoption. I think that we're definitely years ahead until the enterprise will see it for more than just a way to invest and make 10x. You know what I mean?
yeah,
And once a psychological switch happens, where people start using this not because it's potentially profitable, but because it's utilities there, I think
yeah.
that's what's gonna basically drive the Web3 adoption that we all are looking for.
Yeah, I think there was a report. I can't remember who printed it, but there was a report that was saying any kids between, or people between 18 and 25 were, 50% more likely, or all had crypto assets, were all investing in crypto assets over any other asset class, right? And so, to your point, and then you combine that with the transfer, where the boomers are now going to transfer their $65 trillion worth of wealth across into this next generation. Where does that go to? How are they going to be deploying the funds? And I think that's really what's um, accelerating this new platform and new innovation in this space. But how do you
Absolutely.
feel, with that being said, there's a lot of regulation coming in as well, right?
But regulation
Because
is good. Regulation is
yeah,
good because
yeah,
think of it this way, right? Crypto for the past, it was sort of like Wild Wild West. You know what I mean? Like
yeah,
if you look at it, like let's say American Express and Wells Fargo, which are the two of the
yeah,
largest 10 financial companies in the world, right? Believe it or not, they have the same founders, and people don't know it, but the founders of Wells Fargo are also the founders of American Express. And who those guys were? They were guys that basically knew how to sling a gun, and they knew how to transport money on a carriage from one place to another one. And they had the security system of Pinkertons that if
yeah,
all the Wild Wild West cowboys were coming to intercept, they knew how to protect the money. And
yeah,
that's how American Express and Wells Fargo started, because they knew how to
yeah.
transport money from one place to the other, right? And that's what we're seeing right now as well. That hackers are these Wild Wild West heroes,
The
and
outlaws, yeah,
are the outlaws exactly. And you have these Pinkertons that are trying to protect the states, right? And that's just the reality what we're seeing right now as well. Now, when regulation comes in already, and one of the biggest innovations that actually brought down the robberies of those transfer cargoes, if you look at historically speaking, was when the U.S. government printed $1 million bill and $100,000 bill, which was only for one purpose, and that was for them to be able to transfer money from one bank to another one without having to fill out a carriage with cash, right? And that was one of the
yeah, yeah,
innovations that actually skyrocketed the financial system afterwards because it removed the threat, right? And regulation in the space is only going to give ability to people to say, I trust the system. I trust this. You know what I mean? And the good news came a couple of days ago when Gary Gensler, from SEC, he said that he was more than happy to transfer Bitcoin to CFTC. At that point, if CFTC is regulating Bitcoin, it's a commodity. So if I'm a 65-year-old, what you said, if I'm a boomer, right, and I want to diversify into commodities, right, guess what? Bitcoin is a commodity and it's official. And if Bitcoin is a commodity, it's going to open up a whole bunch of different vehicles of how people can buy it. And as we all know, when Bitcoin is going up, the entire crypto system is happy with it. When Bitcoin is not going up, the whole entire altcoins or whatever you want to call it is suffering, right? And I think that I truly believe that regulation is only going to help Bitcoin and it's only going to help crypto. And it's going to bring a lot more flow. Will the outlaws like Josie Wells, is he still going to be able to make a lot of money from it? No. Will the anarchists still be able to, do things and do whole, terrorism financing or some of the stuff that the bad guys are doing? Will they continue to be able to do that? No. But is it going to bring additional new players that are going to replace those guys? Heck yeah. So I'm all for it.
Mm. Yeah, no, I think that's a good view on what's happening, right? I mean, I think one thing that I'm concerned about in this area is that making sure that the regulators are still helping and supporting innovation versus just protecting the incumbents, right? And so to me, I think, how do we have a regulatory framework that allows for this innovation and for disruption so that the youth have new jobs and the opportunity to create new wealth versus just being a big multinational and having to be an employee at a big multinational?
See, I agree with you, and I think that's where the framework actually comes into the play because,
Yeah,
as I said earlier, have a look at this. Like, if you look at the banking sector, right, or the stock market in
yeah,
general, right, until the Great Depression happened, there was no Securities and Exchange Commission, and anybody basically who wanted to underwrite a stock could just go into the stock market and say, "Hey, I'm selling shares of ABCD, blah 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 blah," right? And it was
yeah, yeah,
easy at first. And when they said we're going to start SEC, when FDR and the whole thing happened, he said I want to start the Securities and Exchange Commission. Everybody was like, "Oh no, it's going to ruin the innovation." Blah 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 blah. Right? But in reality, what it did is gave framework for other people that thought themselves superior to the merchants that were in the stock market. They thought, okay, now I have framework and legal framework of how to do it. And this is my boundaries. That's what I'm allowed to do. That's what I'm not allowed to do. So how do I channel my powers? Because this thing still is exciting to me. How do I channel my powers into this? And since then,
yeah,
we had the most amazing growth in the financial markets ever thought
yeah,
possible. You know what I mean?
yeah,
And I hope that something similar is going to happen to crypto as well, where all of a sudden it's no longer a gray area where it's quasi-regulated,
yeah,
thought of and so forth and so forth. If it's regulated, if it's clean, it's kosher, it's legit, you're going to have more people that are going to think within the framework of how can I make something happen within the rules that I'm given. You know what I mean?
yeah,
And
yeah.
hopefully that's what's going to actually push the innovation even further and skyrocket it.
Yeah. And I think that's sort of why, we're doing what we're doing with Truflation, right? We're just really trying to streamline a lot of the workload, right? So that we can actually just capture a lot of this and take a novel approach and bring that out on a daily basis, not on a monthly basis with a 1 month time lag as well, right? And so those were just things that ultimately these new technologies, not only the new technologies, but just novel approaches to some of the uh, um, historic approaches, which are more than a century old, you can do. Um, but I think on that note, it's just also from a regulatory standpoint, we've seen a lot of changes and a lot of guidelines or recommendations or reports come out from the different regulators. Um, and there are sort of from the big institute, the IMFs, and the FSBs, the White House, the SEC does the
Hmm.
report, I don't know, all these different institutions have done these reports. Do you think, given that crypto has generally been a very global phenomenon with node operators and validators and miners around the world, how do you think you're going to manage jurisdictions and different regulation across different countries? How do you think that's going to evolve, particularly if it's a global phenomenon?
I don't think that. I personally think that one of the reasons why they cannot regulate this is because
Yeah,
innovation is outpacing the pace at which these
yeah,
guys are putting out reports. You know what I mean?
yeah,
Once they figure out what layers want, once they figure out what a Bitcoin was, then you had this
yeah,
new concept called layer one. And
yeah.
when they figured out what layer ones were, then you had layer twos. And when they
Yeah.
figured out what layer twos were, then you had all this DeFi and GameFi and ShMadeFi and MoveFi and I don't know, like all these different
Metaverses,
applications, right?
NFTs,
Metaverses,
DAOs.
NFTs. So now they're gonna figure this out, and guess what? You're gonna have this new dudes that just came and they're fundraising right now, or they just
Yeah,
finished their fundraising not long ago. They're gonna come up with the next set of different applications and infrastructure projects where regulators are going to say like, wait a second, we just invested in a whole bunch of energy into finding, researching this, but now it's all futile because we have all these different like cases that we haven't even thought about. And that's why I think that the best thing that regulators can actually do is have the voices basically come from the inside. And
yeah,
that's why they should just come up with a framework, a
yeah.
regulatory framework,
Agreed.
and
Yeah,
say that this is what you're allowed to do, this is what you're not allowed to do. Go figure out the rest of it. You know what I mean?
yeah,
Instead of finding every single detail, like, okay, so this guy's in Switzerland, this guy's in Israel, this guy's in America, that guy's in Georgia, so who gets what, blah, 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 blah. Good luck regulating that ever. You know what I mean? Good luck.
that,
Definitely good luck.
yeah,
But
yeah,
just giving a framework out and just saying, like 10 commandments. This is what you shall
yeah,
do. This is what you shall not do. That's it.
yeah, yeah. No, I like that, and I think that's the way that ultimately will foster innovation and allow for accelerated creation of new opportunities and new jobs and new wealth, right? Which is I think what we need in this world and what youth is looking for. You
For
know,
sure.
on that, yeah. On that note, I think one other thing that I think is really interesting is you mentioned, sort of all these different innovations, new layer ones, layer twos, and layer threes that are evolving. How do you feel, sort of you're sort of somewhat chain agnostic, right? You're not tied to a specific layer one or layer two or
Hmm.
layer three. How do you navigate and what do you look for when you look at a layer one or a layer two? What do you look? I mean, ultimately, you've said the team is really important, but and then there's the other philosophy: as everything and everyone gets tokenized, how are we going to manage? Is there enough block space to manage that? What's your view with the different chains? What do you look at the different chains and the different layer ones, and what are you seeing sort of next 2023?
I personally think that right now we have too many layer ones for now. And
Okay,
I don't believe that the whole world is going to be tokenized. I do not believe that.
okay, yeah,
I think it's going to be confusing. It's going to be extremely hard if that happens.
yeah,
And it's not going to be simple anymore. And I personally am a big fan of Ethereum has a standard called 1155. I don't know if you heard of
yeah,
it or not, which is tokenized NFTs. It's NFTs that have tokens within the code. There's NFTs and tokens in one, in NFT.
okay,
And I personally think that that's a very good glimpse of what the future might look like because a lot of these tokens will be absorbed into NFTs and the trading, this will give some sort of intrinsic value to those NFTs. And the trading is going to happen by the NFT trading that's going to be happening. You know what I mean? Because otherwise,
interesting.
if the whole world is tokenized, then you're running into a big. I mean, can you imagine if you were just to interact with an app, if you actually had to go through like 150 or 300 coins for you to choose one that fits the particular, action that you want to take, right?
Yeah.
I don't think it's not. Now, if everything is tokenized, and if I go to a grocery store, supermarket tomorrow, and those guys have their own coin, and I decide to purchase something, right? Like that means what? I have to go and look for what's the grocery store tokens, So I don't think that everything will be tokenized. I think that's like, utopia. But I do
Okay.
believe that when it comes to tokenization, there are certain things that need to be tokenized, and then there are certain things that should not be tokenized at all. You know what I mean? This shouldn't
Yeah.
be tokenized at all. And that's why I hate whenever people come with what I call forced utility for a token.
Yeah.
I think that it's fake and it's
Yeah.
like it's a red flag for us. When people say, "What is your utility?" Oh, governance and staking, and that's our model. Blah blah blah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah, amazing. Good luck. Yeah, for sure. Go find somebody else. That's a forced tokenomics model, right? But when
Yeah.
somebody has to, sort of like what you guys are doing at Truflation. I don't know if the information is public yet or not, but I think that your token is actually making sense. It's actually a utility that's embedded within the information that I get in return. This actually makes sense. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah, we haven't actually announced it yet, but we are working. I mean, when we first started, we just had. I mean, we go through a journey, right? And we first launched with just a governance token, right? It was a DAO that we set up, and at the time that was the thing to do, right? And so over time, though, you actually were one of a strong proponent in actually sort of pushing us outside our box in terms of think differently, right? Come up with the utility. You need to think differently. And so you pointed us in some really good directions, and we got some humble advice from some very smart individuals that you introduced us to as well. And that allowed us to formulate. And then we tested that with developers and we got their feedback. We formulated that. We then tested it again. And it's a process of practice, improve, practice, improve, practice, improve, play, improve, right? And that process is an ongoing daily activity. You can't just sit down and, oh, I've done it. I don't need to change it anymore. We never need to. It's that constant work at it, which I think is really important. And yeah, is something that every entrepreneur has to go through in the product market fit discovery phase, right?
I agree,
Um,
and that's the question that I think that founders should ask themselves, right? Like token can be a great user acquisition tool. Don't get me wrong; it's a
yeah,
wonderful one,
yeah,
right? Token can be a great rewards tool for retention purposes. You know what I mean?
yeah,
Token can also be a great monetization tool as well. You know what I mean?
yeah,
But the question is this, that the founders and startups really have to think as to what challenges at what time do you want token to solve for you, other than just raising money because we're in the bull market and every single token project gets funded, right? So you actually ask yourself a question like, how does token solve the issues that I currently have? Is it the payments
yeah.
issue? Once again, could it be the marketing stuff, acquisition, retention, monetization, all of those things, evangelization, gives you the ability to do all that, right? Or do you really need governance? Do you really want decentralized governance to govern the protocol? You know what I mean? Or do you really want there to be, like, if it's staking, then what sort of rewards are you giving them in return for them staking, right? So, like, instead of just like copying and pasting because somebody did something and it was powerful, I think that more founders should just think as to what is that we want done and what is that we want token to accomplish within our ecosystem.
Yeah, I mean, I think um, not just having it and shift time. Things shift, right? I mean, having a token in 2017 was a must, right? If you didn't have a token, nobody would raise you money, and there was no point in building on the blockchain, right? Why are you doing that, right? But I think today you look at the trend at the moment, it's very much have an equity company, give me shares, and then figure out, and with a warrant in the token, right? In the future release of a token when and if appropriate, right? And then that gives you time to then figure out what the right utility could be and creating value associated with that. But then you go back, 12 months, it was all about the DAO. You had to set up everything as a DAO. And so you had governance tokens, right? So it's like very much the times evolve. And one of the things that I do find, and I'm curious your thoughts on this as well. You looked at 2009 when Bitcoin first came around. It was to provide an alternative system to the existing financial system. And it happened right at the gate, great financial crisis, the global financial crisis that happened. And now it sort of seems to be moving where into, how do we adapt this new system into the old system versus how do we, or is it a bridge? Is it acting as a bridge? Where are we at in the devolution? And do you think we're creating new systems and getting the old system to adopt the new system? Or are we having new systems move to the old system because there's a lot of tried and tested experience in the old systems that could use some innovation?
It's a great point. Like I was thinking when the whole
So,
Celsius, Luna, Three Arrows, all of that,
yeah,
happened. I was like, if Satoshi is alive, he's probably spinning in his grave. Right? He's probably like committing suicide right now. Like, what the heck did I just do? Because
yeah,
in a
yeah,
sense, it was very similar that like a Lehman Brothers and Bear Stearns in 2008, and now you have basically the same thing that happened in the crypto world, right?
yeah,
And it is what it is. But I think that eventually it's at the end of the day, it's all about supply and demand. You know what I mean?
yeah,
Meaning that as long as there is demand coming for one particular vector within the space, then the supply will happen. So if there's more TradFis that are going to be ones that are going to be adopting blockchain and crypto and so forth and so forth, right? Then you will see probably them skewing it towards their side and the rules that they're used to, because they cannot. I mean, when you're a big TradFi company, right? If you make a 1% shift in your strategy, that's already considered big change. You know what I mean?
yeah, yeah,
Let alone if you
yeah,
have to make 10%. But when you tell them that, listen, this is the way we're used to doing things, and now you have to do 180, then it's like, good luck getting that passed on the board of directors that are like, in their 70s and 80s and still think that, like the real boomers, right? So I think that whoever the demand is going to come from is the one that's going to skew the principles towards what they're used to, and with them having to have minimal change for them to absorb the innovation that's coming from our side. And I think that that's the missing point, that you have a lot of people that are demanding and they're waiting for this shift to happen, but they haven't seen it happen yet. And I think that it's getting closer and closer. The gap is being bridged, and that's where I think already the regulatory framework is going to come in, and it's going to basically green light and say, all right, you have permission to do that. At which point, it's going to be going to the set of rules that were, not made by Satoshi, but made by banks and the bankers and J.P. Morgan and those guys, right? So
yeah.
Rothschilds and I don't know, all of those good guys from back in the day, right?
And I think, I mean, sort of evolving that conversation, right? So these banks, these regulators, and these institutions, or departments of offices and government offices, they're all dealing with a whole bunch of things at the moment, right? They've got inflation, they've got supply chain, they've got energy requirements, they got a whole set of issues that are sitting on their table at the moment. And it's like, but two countries, and inflation is really big, right? Because that's a second tax on people, and people really feel inflation because it hits the shopping cart where I get my food from, right? And so, can I feed and keep everybody fed, right? So, controlling that is really important. But two countries around the world, one is Switzerland, where I'm at right now, doesn't seem to have been infected by inflation. But I mean,
Really,
Israel hasn't been infected by inflation too much either, right?
it actually
How do you
has
think
been.
these countries different? Oh yeah, okay,
What's interesting is that Israel and Switzerland are probably bad examples, because
okay, yeah.
Israel is the most expensive country in the world. Tel Aviv is the most expensive city in the world, and Zurich is number two right after. So it's already expensive. So who cares, right? Who cares, right? That's just the reality. Like, who cares? It's already expensive. So
I go from 50% margin to 45% margin.
exactly. You know what I mean? So who cares, right? Like, whatever. But what's unfortunate is that a lot of the struggles that we actually have to deal with, but we're already used to it, right? Other people are now realizing that it's also happening to them, and they're not budgeted for properly, because one of the things that Swiss people and Israeli people have in common, we both know a thing or two about money, right? Or how to manage money
Yeah.
properly, right?
Yeah.
And it's something that comes generationally, right? Your father taught you how to deal with money before he taught you how to read alphabet. Same thing with my
Yeah.
father, right? That was his
Yeah.
obligation. And we know this. We know how to fund ourselves properly. That if the worst case scenario happens, you have this, safety net that's going to help you out. And a lot of people don't come with this sort of a mindset.
Yeah.
And those are the ones that are
Totally.
probably getting hurt by the price rises the most, because they don't know how to absorb it, because they already are like overstretched themselves.
But I found that was really, to your point, right? That educational element, how to deal with money in life, right? What's the difference between leasing your car versus getting a credit from the bank, or, the loan shark, right? Or something like, how do I calculate the difference? What do I need to do to afford a mortgage? What's my income need to be? What's the term of the mortgage? What's the interest variability that I need to take into account? All of those things, right? How do I educate early on versus math 1 + 1 = 2? Okay, that's great. I now know how 1 + 1 = 2, but how do I then take mathematics into more economic frameworks that I can then use in real life? I think that if we have education on that, that also helps people as they enter into crypto as well, will be really helpful.
And I personally
Right?
think that that's where you come into the play as well, because you're giving this basically ultimate primitive for people to build upon, and
Yeah.
build a whole bunch of different applications for them to use the data that you're giving them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And at that point, what I find really interesting is that about 10 years ago, I don't know if you remember, but we had this whole thing called neo banking boom that was
Yeah.
happening
Yeah.
all
Yeah.
over the
Yeah.
world.
Yeah.
And it was
Yeah.
all about this, robo advisors and this and that,
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
and what I find really interesting is that one of their shortcomings was that they didn't really give additional value to what a regular bank would. You know what I mean? And I think that that's where sort of like a data DAO, like you, like the project that
Yeah.
you give, the data that you give, right, would actually give this neobanks and this, robo advisors an edge that they cannot get anywhere else. Because imagine if, and this is already probably going a little bit more utopian, right? But I think that this day will happen, that before you go to purchase something on your credit card, and you definitely cannot afford it, right? For the system to actually tell you, listen, dude, the inflation is XYZ. If you're going to buy this right now, this is what's going to happen to you in the future. Do you want this or not? And if the answer is no, I don't want it, all right, so in that case, don't buy this, $6 latte at Starbucks. Go buy it, some instant coffee and mix it in the cup and drink it, because that's what's going to save your life, right? So it's a very primitive way of looking at it, as an example that I gave. But I do see that that was some of the things that these robo advisors were actually missing 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I do think that that's where the data that you're going to supply is going to give them the ability to attract users that they were never allowed to attract before, because now they can market them and tell them, do you live paycheck to paycheck? Yes, you do. Do you think the situation is going to get worse before it gets better? I think it's going to get worse, because, now they came up with a report that there's 100% chance that we're going to have recession next year, right? In America. So, oh, wow, really? 100% chance, 100% chance, right? Stefan's been talking about it for a year, but now we have 100% chance that we're going to have recession, right? But that's where this kind of thing comes in, where they could use the data and say, wait a second, yeah, it's going to get worse, but that's how we're actually going to protect you from the storm that's coming. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's why you should use our application instead of somebody else, a different application, because that's how we're going to let you weather the storm. And when the good times come back, that's it. The playing field is going to be fixed. And, it's like a biblical term of 7 years of drought and 7 years of plenty. Actually, the other way around. 7 years of plenty and 7-year drought. You know what I mean? So now we're in a 7-year drought. So whoever helps you survive it, guess what? When the plenty comes, they're the ones that are going to reap the rewards. So, that's what I think.
And I think the other thing is in these harder times and the ones that survive it, you foster really good relationships because you help each other out. You know how you people react in harder times. In good times, everybody's buddy and friends and everything goes seamless, everything works. But in hard times, sometimes you just need to make a handshake and I need to know I can count on my counterparty, right? And it's very different in different times. And I think those relationships hold through in good times.
Absolutely. Perseverance,
Yeah.
Survival of the fittest. And it's not only the survival of the fittest, but the survival of the ones that are the most dedicated to the cause. Because, like the good old term goes, bulls make money, bears make money, and hogs that get slaughtered. You know what I mean? And right now is those times that,
I don't know. First time I've heard that.
Oh, really? Come on. It's a classic.
Yeah.
It's the movie Wall Street. Classic with Michael Douglas and Charlie Sheen. You have to watch that movie, by the way. But it's the reality. If you're bullish about something and you believe about something, guess what? Your time will come. If you're bearish about something and you wait it out, your time will also come. People that get slapped in the face are the ones that, try to find the good times and jump around, and not willing to survive the bad times until the good times come. It's the hardest thing in the world. It's not easy. God knows. It's the hardest thing in the world, surviving those bad times. And but that's how champions are made. That's how winners are made. Is the ones that train the hardest, get the most amount of pain, and then they get the gain afterwards.
Yeah, no, on that note, I'm going to, be super happy and super thankful that you actually shared a lot of this advice in this super exciting times. Even though it's hard, if you are passionate and you are driven and you're ready to go down this path, these are the best times to now come out and shine, and you meet the right people that will also support you through that journey and in that journey. It's not always easy. But if it were easy, everybody would be doing it and there wouldn't be any special components and source to it. The other thing that I learned in this call, and I love learning something all the time, is the founders of American Express and Wells Fargo were the same. I did not know that. So that's another thing I learned. So thank you, Yosef. Super good with you. How can people follow you and where can they go to find out more about you and your philosophies and also the IBA?
LinkedIn is my platform of choice.
Okay.
That's where you can follow me.
So there you go.
Thank you for that.
Thank you, Yosef. Super good having you here. Thank you.
Cheers, man. Thank you for having me, Stefan. Ciao.